Hello everyone, this is Daniel, aka B-Bell Dan. Welcome to part 3 of where I'm constructing a ventriloquist dummy. So just moving along with the construction build. From that last episode, I've 3D printed and kind of cleaned up the test pieces that I'm going to be using to try to figure out the position of the first platform, this first little base here that is going to be going into the, not that one, into the puppet's head, and from here this is where I'm going to start building up the rest and designing the rest of the mechanism. So I need to work on that, but before I go further, we need to still make a couple of modifications to this head here so we can make sure that the eyes are going to be set in at their proper distance and place, and we have enough clearance for the eyelids to move and all that other kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get into that first. So to start this process, I am using a mixture of files and some cheap wood carving tools to try to go in and get to where the eyes are symmetrical, because if you can see, they're not exactly symmetrical, and also try to get a little bit closer to the lines that I drew earlier. Cutting it out, I didn't quite hit my mark. So, I mean, the goal is to try to make sure that there's enough clearance from this outside to fit the diameter of the eye that I've designed this puppet to have, plus also the eyelid. So just going through, just making sure that that clearance is there, which that's what that line is supposed to represent. So this is just going to be a little bit of tedious work, but eventually you'll get a good looking end result when I'm done. Sorry. So continuing to work on this to try to figure out where I want to place the eyeballs, because everything else is going to be surrounding this. I went ahead and attached the little base in there using some pieces of clay just to kind of hold it in, and it took me a while to get the right height. What I did was I put some little dots on the eyeball there and lined it up inside the head to where that eye, the pupil is right at the center line of this entire opening right here. And that gave me the height. And then I kind of adjusted it until it looked like that everything was working. It was blinking just the way that I wanted it to. And so I went in and marked the spots. So let's see if I can put this in here. So it goes in right there. It goes in right there. So if we look inside, that's what we got to go with. So I'm going to use, I put some marks inside there, which I'll show you in a minute. And so from that, I'm going to go ahead and redesign this entire mechanism to have it to where it can be attached, but also slightly adjustable to this base here. The adjustments may be mostly just more for bringing the eyes a little bit further away, maybe a little bit closer, possibly to turn them just ever so slightly, but I don't want to turn them too much. And then from there, I'm going to work on the rest of the mechanisms to go inside it. The mechanism to turn the eye side to side, to flip the eyebrows up and down. So I got that. Okay, everyone. Slight little change of plans because my 3D printer is, yeah, it needs some work. So I'm going to see if I can get this back up and running so I can 3D print out the pieces that I need. It's this auto bed leveler sensor broke off. This was a 3D printed part I made. I'm going to try putting on the piece a plastic that came with it and see if that works. But there's also some other issues that I need to work on. Some of the fans and stuff was slowing down or they weren't working, which affects cooling of the hot end and also of the print itself. And this is also be a good time for me to go ahead and kind of clean up and oil and tighten all these brackets and everything like that. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we can get back to the project at hand. Okay, so with the 3D printer down, I'm going to need to move on and work on some other things. I'm going to go ahead and try to finish sculpting both of the hands so I can get those casted into the material that I'm going to choose to cast them in, and that way those are done. I might actually start working on the body as well, and even some mechanisms inside the head as well that doesn't really require the 3D printer for me to do, such as the mouth. So I'm going to do that by hand. So let me go ahead and I'll get started working on that. Alright, so to try to sculpt the hand, I'm using plasticine clay, which has the advantage of it not drying out, but the disadvantage of it is it's very hard to try to get smooth details here. I mean, with water-based clay, natural clay, you can just use water and smooth it out that way. Here it doesn't really work. It kind of repels the water, so you really got to kind of work with it. But because of the amount of time that I'm able to, or free time that I have to put into this, I don't want this to dry out, so I'm not using natural clay, so I'm using the plasticine clay. Just using a variety of different tools to try to get the details in, and so just kind of just whittling away at it. I mean, we got this little pick here that I use, little fine point pick that I use to get a lot of the small little, fine details in. A couple of other little additional tools with different little points in it, blunt edges for smoothing, little knife edges to try to carve in some deep little details, as you can see here, and even got some of these little pieces here to kind of go in and remove and scrape some clay away from areas that I have a little bit too much clay on. So I'm just kind of just whittling around trying to get the detail. Now I don't have to get with these type of puppets, you don't have to get exact detail. You don't have to, I mean, I guess you could if you want to, but you don't have to necessarily go in and try to get pores and stuff and every little wrinkle and things. But I want to try to get at least the basic amount of detail into it to where these are the folds in the fingers, the fingernails in the back, the knuckles and stuff like that. So if you look at it, that it's a actual hand, or supposed to be the representation of a human hand, and not just like a glove or just human hand like. So just go right in, and once I get this down to where I'm happy with it, I'll start working on the other one, and then I'll go through the process very similar to how I casted the face mold, to get a plaster of Paris, negative casting, and then put those two together, and then pour in some resin that will harden up, and it will give me the hands. And from that I can go in and try to fix some details, smooth it out with some sanding and everything to try to get it look a little bit more professional looking and everything. So I don't have to get it too much into this, but I want to try to get as close as possible, because the more I do onto this, the less I have to do on the final product. So let me go ahead and continue with that. Okay, so far this is where I'm at right now. I've been going ahead and sculpting the hands using this water-based earthen clay, and so far it seems to be holding up very well. It does dry up, but just go ahead and spray with some water, and then you're able to work with it, at least on the outside, and it doesn't seem to be cracking. And from what I understood reading up more about it, as long as it's thick like this and there's no stiff armature underneath it, so it has the ability to shrink as a whole, it seems to be you won't have the problems of it cracking. So far it's working. I'm getting a lot better results from this than I was from this type of clay. This clay does have its place, but for what I'm doing, this seems to be working. So I'm ready to go ahead and finish up this and start with the other one. But you could probably hear I have the 3D printer working now, and so I'm 3D printing something else right now, nothing to do with this project. But that means I can go back and start working on the mechanisms that you saw me working on earlier with it. However, though, after some thought while I was sculpting, I decided that, well, I may not want to go ahead and try to 3D print this whole thing, because 3D printing, I mean, it is plastic and there are layers, so it has potential to break over time and plastic, so it might wear out and everything. So even though that there's going to be a lot of this 3D printed, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and why not try to actually use some actual fabrication and real materials rather than just layered 3D plastic. So for the eyes, I've decided to go ahead and instead with these 3D printed stalks, use these pieces of dowel rod for the stalks as well, which is the right height, and decided to make this part out of metal. So I got some aluminum here that we see, this aluminum stock, which is, it's strong enough to where I think it's going to hold its shape, but it's still flexible to where I can work it. And I'm going to use this right here as kind of a guide to bend this into shape to where it will make this structure here, the support structure that the eyelid blinking mechanism is going to work on. In fact, I've already did that with this piece right here. It's perfect to where it can fit in this but still have a gap in between it all, to where the eyelid is going to sit between here and be able to blink and do whatever. Now this is a little bit bigger than what I've decided on, because this right here is a little bit smaller, and as you can see, but still that gives me plenty of room to work with, and I can still bend this. So imagine, as you will, this sitting on top of that, and then this sitting on top of this. I'll still use a 3D printed plate as the plate that's going to have everything mounted on, but this isn't the plate, this isn't the finished plate, because the finished plate's also going to have holes to where I can screw things in, because I'm going to take this and possibly screw it in, or I might actually design a raised relief or raised area here that this can sit in, so there's more areas for me to glue it in, or rather than trying to drill in from the bottom, I can go ahead and drill in from the from the sides to to fix that where I want it to be fixed. So it's going to kind of look like that. So some of it is going to be 3D printed. The eyeball is going to be 3D printed using clear ABS. This is going to be 3D printed. There's going to be still a lot of parts that's going to be 3D printed, but a lot of the parts I've decided I'm going to go ahead and just fabricate it by hands, kind of how they used to do it. So I'm going to start working on that from this point on, from trying to fabricate what I can out of using little pieces of aluminum stock and brass and things, such as if y'all have watched the video of where I made a puppet mechanism for another customer, and the puppet mechanism was utilized to where you had the eyebrows and the blinking mechanisms to where if this would move the mouth up and down, and then here would be the eye, here would be this finger right here would be the eyebrows. I did a lot of this to where we had this piece of aluminum straight stock right here, and this piece of hollow brass or copper, this might be copper tubing, and I just insert one into the next, so this would almost act as kind of like almost as a bearing to some sort. I do know that there are brass bearings that are out there. I've seen them at the shop, so that's kind of what gave me this idea. So this will allow it to smooth or freely move around in here. And so far, I don't think I've had any problems. I have a test puppet mechanism that I made about that same time that I made the one that I'm talking about, and so far everything seems to be working just fine. So I'll just need to figure out how to drill a hole in through this, that this will be inserted into here, and then this will be inserted into and glued, imagine as you will, into the eye, and then this will be inserted into there, and that will allow it to be able to, the eyes to turn, and similar mechanisms for in here to where we'll have a hole drilled through here, this inserted into that, and possibly soldered in so it's not going to move, and then the eye mechanism is going to be like that. So that's what I plan on doing from this point on. So everyone, that concludes episode 3 of me making this particular type of puppet. I apologize. I do know that there's a bit of a delay or a long period of time that is stretched out between episode 2 and this episode, but the holidays were coming up and I had a bunch of stuff that I had to try to take care of, both personal and work related, so I wasn't able to devote a whole lot of time to this. But now I have a little bit of a good mellow break after the holidays from work, so I have plenty of time for me to go ahead and try to push forward onto this. And there's even another project that I got coming up that I'm going to need to start working on. So I'll be working on 2 projects in tandem. But when I can't work on something on this puppet project, I'll work on the other one. But I'm going to start having videos out for that other project here pretty soon, so pay attention to that. I try to have a video out for both of those projects out, one probably at the beginning of the week, one at the end of the week. The one project shouldn't take too long, though. I think it's very straightforward and very easy, so that might be about 2 or 3 episodes, and then it's done and I'm ready to send that piece off to the customer that wanted it. But this one right here, because it's a full puppet that the guy wants, making the body, making the mechanisms, making the head, everything, it's going to take a little bit of more time, but I'm going to try to get as much as I can done on this week. So be looking out towards episode 4 of making this puppet, and also episode 1 of this other project. But until then, I want to say this is B-Bell Dan. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.